72,000 homeless people. This sounds like a milestone to be proud of for Los Angeles, after years of being mired in a homelessness crisis. The official report highlighted that figure as a sign of progress, proof that the city was on the right track. But what if I told you that behind this number lies a smokescreen, concealing a harsher truth? Because when you step out onto the streets of Los Angeles, instead of seeing the light of revival, you're more likely to encounter a haunting scene. People digging through trash cans for food, families sleeping on the sidewalks, and makeshift tent cities stretching out like a parallel city right in the heart of America's wealthiest metropolis. How could a city that once symbolized the California dream become a place where thousands of people have to eat garbage and sleep on nightmarish streets? Is this just a tragedy for Los Angeles, or a reflection of a nation losing its ability to protect its own citizens? In today's video, we'll peel back the shiny veneer to find out why policies that were hailed as successes have been powerless against the tide of homelessness, and why promises of revival ultimately lead to thousands of people continuing to wander the streets and live off waste. Perhaps dramatic twists aren't just appearing in Hollywood blockbusters, but are now happening right on the streets of Los Angeles. In 2025, this city is said to be witnessing encouraging signs. The total number of homeless people in the entire county has decreased to approximately 72,308, with Los Angeles City alone accounting for nearly 43,669 people. This figure is nearly 4% lower than the previous year, marking the second consecutive year of decline. On paper, this seems like a step forward, and for many residents, the streets are indeed somewhat less chaotic. But the question is, did over 3,000 people really find their way back home? Or did they simply disappear from statistical reports only to reappear in hidden corners of the city? Not a few social experts suspect that this decline may stem from more reported relocation measures and political changes rather than substantial ones. And if we set aside our skepticism for a moment and accept that the numbers are declining, there's still an undeniable truth. Over 72,000 people are still living on the streets. Their journey back to normal life was almost completely blocked by fundamental barriers. The minimum wage in Los Angeles in 2025 is $17.87 per hour, which is approximately $2,600 per month for a full-time job. But the rent for a one-bedroom apartment has also climbed to $2,800 to $3,000 per month. This means that if a worker wants to own a roof over their head, instead of spending 30% of their income on housing as recommended, a low-skilled worker now has to pay over 107% of their income. The enormous numbers are increasingly making the dream of homeownership a luxury. Meanwhile, federal budget cuts of approximately $750 million per year have left local public services and healthcare systems severely underfunded. Support centers are still trying to cope, providing cheap meals, free showers, or a few basic services. But shrinking resources make that support almost like a few drops of water in a barren desert, increasingly scarce and difficult to obtain. Not to mention the housing first model, which prioritizes placing the homeless in stable housing, is weakening after President Trump's latest executive order, giving way to policies focused on mandatory mental health treatment and increased street enforcement. These changes have clear consequences. Frontline services are overloaded, waiting lists are endless. Many people are forced to leave temporary shelters, lose necessary documents or medication, and enforcement campaigns without accompanying housing solutions only push them back onto the streets in a vicious cycle. And so, the crisis reached a dead end. The small-scale efforts of charitable centers, though full of compassion, are not enough to fill the vast gap. Meanwhile, the already fragile lives of tens of thousands of people are becoming even more desperate, like a wound that has never had a chance to heal. Does that decrease truly reflect progress? Or is it just the city's way of hiding the pain behind a curtain of numbers? And if even Los Angeles, once the symbol of the American dream, is powerless against the vortex of homelessness, then what city is capable of escaping this trap? People often say that poverty is like a magnet that attracts all misfortunes. And in Los Angeles, that seems truer than ever. Whatever event happens in this city, the homeless are always the first group to suffer. In January 2025, a wildfire erupted in Pacific Palisades, sweeping away the entire city in dry Santa Ana winds, reaching speeds of up to 140 km/h. In that sea of fire, over 11 people were engulfed by the flames, nearly 180,000 residents had to evacuate, over 10,000 homes were burned down with preliminary total losses, reaching $57 billion. Dense smog forced schools, hospitals, and public spaces to close, leaving the city suffocating in ash. Amidst that chaos, the already vulnerable homeless are now even more susceptible. Many people have just been placed in shelters, converted hotels, or social housing, and were forced to evacuate urgently. The stable housing they had just found was immediately gone, pushing them back onto the streets or into their old cars. A single mother holding her 7-year-old child shared, "We escaped the fire, but even our last tent burned down. I have nothing left, and I don't know where I'll find a meal for my children tomorrow." However, even before the ashes had cooled, the city continued its campaign to clear homeless encampments, taking away their tents, meager belongings, and even their IDs. That image sparked a wave of outrage. A resident spoke out on social media platform X in dismay. Amidst this chaos, the city of Los Angeles is still cracking down on its homeless neighbors. How can this be acceptable? The events didn't stop there. The repeated immigration crackdowns, protests, and social unrest have disrupted support services, further destabilized the living environment, and once again put the homeless at risk of displacement. Simultaneously, the economic shockwaves from the nationwide wave of 100,000 job cuts due to AI and recession have strongly impacted Los Angeles. Following that, the city plans to cut an additional 1,600 jobs in the 2025 to 2026 budget to offset a nearly billion deficit. This opens up a new reality. The homeless are not just street beggars, but increasingly could be white-collar workers who have lost both their jobs and their homes. As events continue to pile up, from natural disasters to economic downturns, from social unrest to coercive policies, the cycle of homelessness becomes even more brutal. The existing solutions are just like temporary band-aids on a necrotic wound, not addressing the root cause. And if this chaos continues, Los Angeles could see a new wave of homelessness, larger, more desperate, and more difficult to control. Do these enforcement and cleanup campaigns truly address the root causes of the homelessness crisis? Or are they merely transforming human suffering into more palatable numbers for reports? When a wealthy city allows people with nothing left to lose to suffer further losses, is that still social management or just the erosion of humanity? Los Angeles is still called the City of Angels, but beyond the bright lights of Hollywood, in the darkness where the spotlight doesn't shine, there are neighborhoods that many residents liken to hell on earth. There, the streets were lined with tents, piles of trash, and a stench that permeated the thick air. This scene not only frightened the public, but also made many police officers, who are accustomed to facing danger, cautious about entering. Some local reports have described that in certain areas, patrol forces are less visible because the risk of violence, crime, and lack of control is higher than usual. While the absolute accuracy of these accounts is difficult to verify, the fact remains that not a few neighborhoods have become hotspots, forcing the surrounding community to find ways to avoid them. This creates a contrasting picture, a Los Angeles that shines brightly on its main avenues, and another, darker Los Angeles, where even law enforcement representatives cannot easily be present. Local residents share that they often hear arguments, shouting, and sometimes even violent incidents right outside their doors. Some people believe that just by taking a wrong turn down a street, you enter a completely different world where all social rules seem to be broken. In that context, the sense of unease comes not only from the presence of the homeless, but also from the fear that the city has allowed those areas to fall into a state of neglect. The irony lies in the fact that, while Los Angeles spends billions of dollars to maintain its image as a tourist and entertainment destination, many streets within the city have become no-go zones that the authorities find difficult to control. Many sociologists believe this is no longer just a housing issue, but the collapse of community trust. When people are afraid to cross a neighborhood within their own city, it's a sign that the boundaries of safety have been broken. Nevertheless, efforts to find a solution are still ongoing. Some non-profit organizations and major brands have partnered with the city to pilot models for emergency housing and mobile medical support. For example, collaborative programs between governments and businesses in the construction sector, such as the Hilton Foundation, are being cited as a potential direction for providing temporary housing and long-term support to those trapped in this cycle. Although there is still much debate about its effectiveness, it is proof that the city has not completely abandoned the fate of tens of thousands of people. If even the streets of one of America's wealthiest cities can become places where the police are hesitant, then should we understand this as a failure of security, of policy, or of an entire society that has failed to keep its promises to its own citizens? Perhaps nowhere else so clearly illustrates the paradox of wealth alongside despair as Los Angeles. This city is still often promoted as a paradise of opportunity, where anyone with ambition can find their place. However, behind that glamorous facade lies a harsh truth. With just a small event, anyone can fall out of the safety net and slide into the vortex of homelessness. The locals here often say, jokingly but with a bitter truth, in LA, you can find a job, but finding a house is even harder. Indeed, according to LASA's 2025 report, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment ranges from $2,800 to $3,000 per month, while the city's minimum wage is $7.87 per hour, which is equivalent to approximately $2,600 per month for full-time workers. That is, someone working a full 40 hours a week without taking a single day off would still have to spend their entire income just to pay rent. All remaining costs, from food and healthcare to fuel, force them to take on debt, cut back, or simply give up. In reality, not everyone can afford market-rate apartments. Many families seek out social housing programs, but the waiting lists are years long. Transitional housing models, budget hotels, or temporary apartment complexes are often overcrowded. And when demand far exceeds supply, the only option left for many is to live crammed into old cars or set up makeshift tents on the sidewalk. Urban experts have warned that the affordable housing crisis not only makes the poor more vulnerable to homelessness, but also squeezes the middle class. Families that were once stable but are now struggling with medical bills, tuition, or even a single job loss can become social outcasts in just a few months. In other words, Los Angeles is not only facing a fixed, homeless population, but is also witnessing the formation of a new generation of homeless. People who once had jobs, education, and even owned homes, but can no longer cope with the rising cost of living. Some solutions have been proposed. Mayor Karen Bass's Inside Safe program, for example, aims to reduce tent encampments and open up more emergency housing options. Non-profit organizations and major brands like the Hilton Foundation are also partnering with the city to develop sustainable housing projects that support the reintegration of the homeless. Although its effectiveness is still limited, it's a signal that society is still looking for another door to open, rather than letting everything sink into darkness. However, the difficult question to answer is, in a city where rental prices have exceeded the affordability of workers, will these scattered efforts be enough to turn the tide, or will they just be tiny drops in an increasingly dry desert? People often say, if a problem can be solved with money, it's no longer a problem. But in Los Angeles, the paradox lies in the fact that the government has spent billions of dollars over the years, yet the fate of tens of thousands of homeless people remains largely unchanged. What confuses many people is that this enormous sum of money sometimes seems to be used for cleaning up, enforcing, or concealing homelessness, rather than directly creating sustainable housing solutions. Reports indicate that over a decade, the city and county of Los Angeles spent tens of billions of dollars on programs related to the homelessness crisis. In 2023 alone, the city allocated approximately $1.3 billion to address this issue. However, according to the 2025 PIT count, there are still over 72,000 homeless people living in the county, and the number has decreased by less than 4% compared to the previous year. This led many residents to ask, where did the money go, and why were the results so meager? Some opinions suggest that the large budget is dispersed across too many categories, from operating the apparatus, temporary rent, contracts with intermediary organizations, to management and enforcement costs on the streets. Police sweeps, confiscations, or evictions sometimes cost millions of US, but only move the homeless from one street corner to another without making them disappear. That's why people call this an expensive war against the poorest of the poor. Frontline services are becoming increasingly overloaded. The waiting list for social housing is years long. Many homeless people lost their personal documents during cleanup campaigns, making it difficult for them to access benefits or employment opportunities. It's a vicious cycle. The policy is expensive, but doesn't offer a way out. Some experts warn that if this approach doesn't change, Los Angeles will continue to burn money with only superficial, slight decreases in numbers to show for it. Nevertheless, not all doors are closed. Collaborative programs with major organizations and brands like the Hilton Foundation are opening up a different direction. Building sustainable housing models combined with healthcare and career support, instead of solely focusing on enforcement and temporary solutions. This may not be a comprehensive solution yet, but it is proof that budgets can be used in a more humane and effective way. Should Los Angeles continue to spend money to clean up its image? Or is it time to use those same resources to truly change the lives of those who are being left behind? People often think of the homeless as social outcasts, with nothing left to lose and contributing to no economy. But in Los Angeles, the story is much more complex. Beneath the makeshift tents and nightmarish streets lies a shadow economy that operates daily, exploiting the very desperation of tens of thousands of homeless people. Imagine this. On a sidewalk full of tents, not only are people huddled in thin blankets, but there are also people collecting cash to reserve each tent. Some accounts suggest that informal networks have formed where an empty lot or street corner is seen as an asset that can be rented out. Although this amount is small, for those who are impoverished, it is a burden that pushes them into a state of dependency. Although not fully verified, those stories shed some light on how the homelessness crisis creates benefits for certain groups in the shadows. The irony is that the government spends billions of dollars each year to mitigate the homelessness crisis. But some of the money and resources are caught in a cycle of management, enforcement, or dealing with the consequences of this shadow economy. Some community centers have warned that without comprehensive policies, the homelessness industry will only expand, leading to more profiteering groups than helping hands. Nevertheless, there are still more humane approaches. Collaborative projects with large organizations like the Hilton Foundation are testing sustainable housing combined with vocational training, aiming to replace the cycle of dependency with real opportunities. Instead of allowing the homeless to become tools in the hands of the shadow economy, these programs aim to reintegrate them as useful members of the formal economy. Is Los Angeles fighting the homelessness crisis, or is it inadvertently fostering a shadow economy that thrives on it? And when an entire wealthy city has to accept this parallel existence, should we consider it a failure of management, or the inevitable price of a society that has allowed the gap between rich and poor to become too wide? People often think of homelessness as a problem for other people, the lazy, the depraved, or those who have lost everything. But in Los Angeles in 2025, the picture is much more bleak. Homelessness is no longer an unfamiliar phenomenon. It has become a shadow hanging over anyone, including those who once had stable jobs, families, and a solid roof over their heads. Imagine an office worker who, after 20 years with the company, is suddenly laid off during a round of job cuts due to AI and economic downturn. Unexpected medical bills arrived when his wife needed surgery, and within a few months, the savings he had accumulated for his old age had vanished. Such cases are not uncommon, as the city of Los Angeles is expected to cut 1,600 jobs in the 2025 to 2026 budget to offset a nearly billion deficit. Adding to the nationwide layoff trend, over 100,000 jobs disappeared in just 1 year, leaving thousands of families in a precarious situation. Many social experts describe this situation as a generational trap. Elderly people living on meager pensions cannot keep up with the average rent of around $800 to $3,000 per month for a one-bedroom apartment. Young people struggle with tuition fees, student loans, living expenses, and are easily derailed by a financial shock. And as middle-class families, traditionally considered the backbone, also began to falter, the line between having a home and losing a home became increasingly blurred. In that gloomy picture, a few rays of light still glimmer. Some charities and major brands like the Hilton Foundation are partnering with the government to develop the Housing First model, prioritizing stable housing first, followed by healthcare, mental health, and employment. Despite ongoing debates about its effectiveness, this is considered the only solution capable of breaking the cycle, providing people with a foothold before asking them to change. In a society where anyone can become homeless after a single event, is Los Angeles, and the United States more broadly, prepared enough to protect its own citizens? Or are we all just waiting for our turn to enter that spiral? The homelessness crisis in Los Angeles seems to be more than just cold numbers in a report. It's a mirror reflecting the fragility of modern society. The brightly lit Hollywood streets, once promising the American dream, have now become temporary homes for tens of thousands of homeless people. And what many people find unsettling is that in that vortex, anyone can become a part of it. Just with a big enough event, an unexpected debt, or an unannounced layoff. Is this just a tragedy for Los Angeles, or a warning for an entire country that once prided itself on the American dream? And in a society so wealthy it's overflowing, why are there still citizens who have to eat garbage and sleep on the streets? If you feel that what's happening in Los Angeles needs to be more widely known, please leave your comments below. What do you think is the real solution to this cycle? Policy, community, or a change in how we perceive marginalized people? Don't forget to like and share this video so that more people can see the truth behind the glamorous lights, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories in the America 2025 series. The content in this video is compiled from various public information sources, social reports, and community sharing. Some of the data and details mentioned are estimates or cannot be fully verified, and are intended for analysis, commentary, and to stimulate discussion only. The video is not intended to assign blame to any individual, organization, or government. Any statements, questions, or opinions presented are for reference and reflection only, and do not represent an absolute conclusion. Viewers are encouraged to learn more from official sources for a more comprehensive perspective.